just because I've done it in school or just because somebody hasn't, that doesn't mean it's too late and doesn't mean you can't do it anymore and you miss the bus. You can basically start at any time you want to. Create your own speech competition. Write a page full of speech that on a topic that inspires you and speak on it in front of the mirror and see how you sound. Or
Yes.
even better, record yourself on camera and see how you sound.
Ragini Sundarraman, welcome to the Mikey Shots podcast once again.
Thank you so much. I think I'm really happy and excited to be here for the second time.
So, Ragini, the topic for today's podcast is communication skills, and this topic is important. Why I feel it's important because communication is required to excel in the corporate world as well as to excel in life in general, right? So, in the previous podcast, we talked about how you can crack your dream job and get that dream company or that dream role, whatever you're wishing for, right? But the process of getting there involves a lot of hard work, smart work, and working on your communication skills, right?
Definitely.
So before I begin this podcast, right, before I begin this episode, I just want to give a glimpse about what you're currently doing and what's been your past, right, to the listeners. Right? So Ragini, you are currently working at Google, and if I talk about a corporate career, you've been working for more than 3 years now, I think almost 3.5, 4 years now, and you've also done your MBA from Narsi Monji, Mumbai. Apart from that, you're at a place in your company where you have to communicate with your stakeholders in different parts of the world, right? Say, US, Australia, India as well, right? Now, the first question which pops into my mind is that how did you become an effective communicator? And I ask you this question because I feel that you have achieved so much in life so early. And one thing which has played a big part in that achievement, in that success, is communication, right? The communication skill which you have. So tell me more about your journey to becoming an effective communicator.
Sure. I think first off, I would like to say that the journey is not complete. I think the journey to becoming an effective communicator is ever evolving. There's always so much to learn, so much to improve upon, so much you can work upon. But if I were to talk back to where it all began, I think it all culminated early on in my school days. So I think I've been lucky enough to always have that innate ability to communicate well, to speak well. And I think that comes from having the habit of reading a lot while I was younger, being able to communicate in English with my relatives to brush up on my skills and become more comfortable with the language. And at the same time, having a school and having teachers that gave me the right platform to actually hone my skills and become an effective speaker. So I think these were the main highlights that have helped me become the effective communicator that I am today. And if it were not for all the debates, the elocutions, the speech competitions I took part in during my school time, I don't think I would have been such a confident speaker or an effective communicator today.
That's a great point you raised. You talked about your childhood and how your family also helped you shape in terms of communicating effectively, right? But the question again which pops into my mind is what is effective communication?
Yeah, true.
What does it mean?
I
Communication is
think
one thing.
effective communication, according to me, has three, I would say, branches to it. One would be what you're trying to say, the second would be how well you're saying it, and the third would be how well it is tuned to the audience you're saying it to. So for you to be an effective communicator, it's not enough if you're able to speak good English or if you're just able to master the language or say big words. That doesn't really matter. I think it's important to be able to gauge the audience that your communication is going to be aimed at, and then have a look at how you can effectively tailor your words so that it matches to the listeners well. That is what forms an effective communication. So I think how and what are definitely significant pieces, but who you're communicating to also becomes a very important aspect, that I think sometimes get overlooked in making the how or what the bigger picture.
Right. So that's a good point you raised about how and what, as in tailoring your message to the audience and the people who are actually listening to you. Now, when it comes to communication, right, this whole process of communication essentially involves the sender, the medium, and the receiver,
Yeah.
right? So the sender can essentially communicate in visual form,
Correct.
right, in written form, right, in
Correct.
verbal form, right, in non-verbal form as well, which is your body language, your tone,
Your
right,
gestures.
yeah, your gestures, right, and on the other side of the medium is the listener, right. So if you're not a good listener, right, you're not an effective communicator. That's also one thing which I read about, which I experienced also throughout my content creation journey also, right? So for example, the listeners who are listening to this podcast, for example, if they're not understanding what I am trying to say, I'm not an effective communicator, right? And if I am saying something which is important and they're not able to understand, they're not listening properly, they're not effective communicators themselves also.
Yeah.
So it's a
And
two-way
I think
thing.
not just that, I think listening in itself is also two-way. So when I said who we are communicating to also becomes such an important aspect of encompassing what effective communication is. If we are not listening to who the audience is, if we are not listening to what the other person's comfortable with or what the other person's going to be receptive towards, then automatically we don't become effective communicators ourselves.
Right.
So I think it's being a communicator, a listener, effective listener rolled into one that gives you that whole holistic tag of an effective communicator.
And a lot of times I've seen that even for me personally, that when I'm sitting in a debate or in a group discussion, right, the urge is always to speak up and not to listen, right? And in that moment, right, we kind of tend to miss out on a lot of information which the other person is talking about, and that kind of help you shape up your own message, right? Now, Ragini, tell me one thing that you talked about the fact that communicating well is important. It's not important how well versed are you with English language, right?
True.
But the hard reality is that, specifically if I talk about India, the corporates, the organizations which are working from this country, they operate on the English language.
Yeah.
That's the hard reality. No matter what we say that India is a country of number of languages and dialects. Agreed, India has evolved languages, Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, etc., and a lot of dialects as well. But the hard reality is that the corporate world thrives on English. English is the link language, and more than 1.6 billion people, as per the reports and research, 1.6 billion people across the globe speak in English and understand English. Whereas more than 3 billion people talk in, use Chinese, right?
Yeah.
Mandarin, whatever. But still, English is the one language, common thread, especially in India. So I'm also teaching students on an edtech platform and teaching them communication skills and how to be effective and better communicators. Yeah. Through my experience, I have seen that they always ask me this one question: how should we improve our English? Yeah. Either from scratch or from somewhere they may have some base of English already with them, but they're not able to write well or speak well. So the pressing question they have is how should they improve their English vocabulary or whatever, English language in general, right? Yeah. What is your perspective on that?
Sure. I think before diving into that, I would just like to address one thing related to what we just spoke about, English being the standard and how it's widely accepted all over. So I do agree. I think there's no denying the fact that English is a very integral part of how you communicate in the corporate world. It is a common thread that binds majority of the people across the globe and in India together, at least in business communication. But I think one thing that we should be thankful for, and maybe we should be sort of aware of, is the fact that the world we live in today is far more understanding, aware, and accepting than maybe 10, 15 years ago. I think with social media and all the wokeness that it has brought to the generation of today, we are pretty accepting in not judging a person too quickly by the way in which they speak English. And I think this is the one thing that budding communicators should keep in their mind. Don't worry about people judging you for your grammar. Don't worry about people judging you for incorrect use of the language or not pronouncing certain words properly or not speaking effectively, because frankly, what other people judge you on doesn't really matter. What matters is that you carry on communicating in a language until you're comfortable with it, despite the mistakes that you may make. Because that is the path to finally becoming good and mastering that language and being able to communicate naturally. So I think if we were to segue into how to improve your command over the English language and how to be a more effective communicator in that language, the first thing is take every chance you can to actually speak, read, or write in that language. Because only when you put it in practice, you will get that confidence to continue speaking in it, to continue communicating in it, and also identify gaps that you may have with that language. So I think number one is don't really bother about what the world thinks. Communicate confidently in English wherever it is required that you speak in English, because I don't think 5 years down the line, some two people's judgment on your English is really going to matter if you're going to master the language. So I think first and foremost, practice and continue speaking in that language as often as you can. Second, and I think this is an important habit for everybody to develop, irrespective of whether you're already good at English, you're not good, you're just starting out, whatever it may be. I think in the lives that we lead today with social media and all these jargons and short forms and acronyms, it's very easy to lose track of the original language, the actual language that you're supposed to be aware of.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to separate out at least 15 to 20 minutes a day to read through traditional actual English. What we read on social media may not necessarily be the right English usage, may not necessarily be how you communicate in a business environment. So I think just taking out 10 to 15 minutes a day to read through a newspaper or read a snippet out of a book that you find interesting, basically anything that keeps you engaged, helps you read in the language that you want to master, will go a long way in you becoming comfortable with that language.
Great point. Okay, Ragini. So I think you've raised some very pertinent points, and also the fact that today's generation, which is a Gen Z, they are, which we call as digital natives, since they
Yeah.
were born in the digital era, born and brought up in the digital era, and they have technology in their hands from the very beginning. So yeah, they can get lost in those jargons.
Yeah.
Agreed. And adding to your point about writing, right, and reading as well, watching movies. Another factor which I have actually come across personally is listening as well. So since the very beginning, since my childhood, I've been a fan of cricket commentators, right? Harsha Bogle, Ravi Shastri, Sunil Gavaskar. These people, basically, they're my icons when it comes to communicating well.
Yeah.
They have really shaped my, confidence in terms of speaking. You talked about confidence also, and you talked about, other aspects as well. So one thing where I think even the listeners can, go back to their old memories of watching cricket commentary in English. So these guys, they were very polished in terms of communicating in English, specifically when it came to cricket.
Yeah.
And what I used to do was I used to go back to my room after watching them and try to mimic them in front of the mirror. In a way, so I am an introvert, right? Which means that I'm not comfortable in front of like 100 people, right? On the stage. I have a lot of stage fear. I still have some stage fear. But at the same time, I also realize that I can't even stay, talk in front of 10 people, right? So, and I don't enjoy social gatherings a lot, right? I don't enjoy talking to a lot of people, right? So, being an introvert and listening to them kind of shaped the way, I create content today as well. I did not realize back then because it was more of subconscious listening.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of helps anybody who's listening to, say, a podcast like this,
Yeah.
or any other podcast which, they enjoy listening to.
Yeah, and not just podcasts. I think reading today has gotten such a refresh change with all the technology we have. So if you're not someone who's very used to reading, if you're not someone who's very engaged with the concept of reading a book, you have ebooks that you can actually listen to. And I think that in itself will give you a very good exposure in terms of one, going through different literature, different stories, or different writing formats that books might have, and two, also having the advantage of actually hearing how each of those words are pronounced or how each of those sentences are enunciated when spoken by an actual native English speaker.
Hmm. And another factor which I think comes across is English in the American accent, and we have the British accent because we've been taught in schools which were shaped by the British who came
Yeah.
to India, right? So sometimes it gets confusing, but somewhere down the line, American English and the British English are kind of similar. They
Yeah.
differ only in the spellings and
I think a few spellings here
Yeah,
and there are odd, but if you were to stick to your guns and just focus on following one school of English, either UK or the US, then I think you should be fine. The problem is when we start trying to follow or mimic both, I think again that comes from fear of judgment. Like if you're speaking to an American colleague but you use UK spellings, you always fear whether they're going to judge you for using wrong spellings. I think that's one thing we have to eliminate. We've grown up being taught UK English, and it's difficult for us to innately change that. So it's all right because it's just an extra U or not, a difference between an S and a Z in verbs like organize, and so it doesn't really matter as long as you stick to your guns and just follow one school of thought.
Good point, Ravi. So tell me more about the fact that we talked about English language and learning
Yeah.
English and improving English. Is there any particular icon you used to follow in your childhood or even today?
So I would say there was no specific popular celebrity or icon that I used to follow, but the role models I looked up to were mainly my teachers and my seniors back in school. So just maybe drawing back to my journey, ever since I was maybe in the third grade or the fourth grade, I've been an active participant in elocution, speech competitions, and debates, and these used to be within school, with other schools, so intra-school, inter-school, both. And it used to occupy like at least 2 months out of my entire year practicing for this, narrating the speech hundreds of times over to the teacher, going back to the drawing board and rewriting the speech, rewriting sentences that need work, and then focusing on pronouncing or enunciating certain sentences for that effect when you're speaking to a large crowd. So I think a lot of that inspiration came from seniors who used to speak amazingly well, and I picked on some good things that they used to do. On my teachers back in school who gave me very pointed feedback on where my pronunciations are lacking or where I need to focus on my voice modulation or why even voice modulation is important when you're communicating a certain thing. So I think I didn't have a single role model, but I was lucky enough to have an entire ecosystem to garner inspiration from.
I think on the flip side, I was the exact opposite, right? I never participated in debates or I never participated in any GDs or any elocution
Yeah.
competitions or never, went up to the stage even in school assemblies to talk about any topic or even recite any poem and all that. But somewhere down the line, I had that kida, we call it kida, within us. I wanted to do something in the media front, right? I wanted to talk to the camera or to record something on the radio sometime, right? So and this all this in 2017-18 when I started creating content for YouTube, all of this came together. The childhood memories and the subconscious listening to
Yeah.
the cricket commentators all came together to help me start my own YouTube channel, right? On whatever interest I had. For example, fitness I started with, and now I'm doing this podcast called Mike and Shots where I cover perspectives. So subconscious, listening, reading, writing kind of help. I think your point is very pertinent as well. If you really are interested in,
Yeah.
talking in English and taking part in competitions, you can still do that. It's
Exactly. I think you just touched the exact point I was going to talk about after this, which is just because I've done it in school or just because somebody hasn't, that doesn't mean it's too late and doesn't mean you can't do it anymore and you miss the bus. You can basically start at any time you want to. Create your own speech competition. Write a page full of speech that on a topic that inspires you and speak on it in front of the mirror and see how you sound. Or
Yes.
even better, record yourself on camera and see how you sound. Like
exactly
those are very effective ways to judge yourself, or if you're comfortable with someone in your inner circle who you can share this with, who you can share this video with, or you can speak in front of. If you think they're people who can give you some good feedback, feel free to do that. I think those are the best ways to hone your skills. And just because you did not get the opportunity to do it back in school does in no way means that you should miss out on it in any way. You can still do it, and all it takes is a little bit of practice and a little bit of taking out focus time every day. So it will be an effort in the beginning, but I think once you start seeing results, you'll actually enjoy the process, and I think the benefits will be for you to see for yourself.
Yeah. So on that note, you gave a very important pertinent point about recording yourself, right? And I always give this hack to a lot of students which I communicate with on the EdTech platform. So coming to the next segment where we'll talk about certain hacks which people can use to improve upon their English, right? So since I've been actually teaching on on an EdTech platform, I just want to point out a couple of hacks which they can use to improve upon their English, which even I used. And the number one hack which even Ragini just recommended is recording yourself on either on the camera, either on Zoom, right? And then showing it to your friends or your family, right? And you can do one more thing is that they may judge you based on what you've recorded or whatever, but don't always rely on their judgment also, because if you rely more on judgment, then I think your own personal judgment kind of fades away. That's what I feel. So you can take out all the people. I learned this 2-3 years ago in a corporate setting where we had this session that whenever you're communicating with like 10-15 people, remove the people aspect away from them, right? You're just talking to normal human beings, right? So don't have that element of fear when you're talking to people as to if they judge you on how you speak, how you look, and your accent, etc. Just be confident. Have a loud voice, and then I think your confidence level also kind of rise up when you have a louder voice. So loud voice, louder tone, a clearer tone really helps in communicating better, either maybe in English or Hindi or any other language. If you're not good at English also, you can practice in any language you are good at. For example, you may be good at Tamil.
Until you get that confidence.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think one more hack that I've used a lot in verbal communication, and this is especially holds true if you have like stage fear or fear speaking in front of a large group of people, is when you're actually, so I think right now it's become easier since we're on Zoom and we can afford to not look at the 100 faces and just speak to the camera. But say you're coming, I think offices are moving back to a normal setup now, and say you're standing in the middle of a room and you have to speak to 100 people and you're all jittery. The best way to get rid of that jitteriness is to just focus on the center of the room. So don't focus on people in general. You don't really need to look into people's eyes, because their expressions, their reaction, if somebody is for that particular second when you're looking at them in their phone or not interested, that might just throw you away and make you forget what you were speaking about. So in such scenarios, when such things do affect you minutely, the best thing to do is to just keep your focus in the center of the room, and so that you don't look like a robot who's just looking in one direction and speaking, just casually scan your eyes through the room without actually focusing your attention towards any specific person. So this usually helps in dissipating that fear that you might have, because when you're not focusing on a specific person, it removes the fear of the fact that there are 100 people sitting in front of you. You then just see an empty room that you're speaking to, and that really helps boost up confidence when you're suffering from something like this.
That's so true. I think you've touched another nerve where, if you have to give a presentation, right, say to 20-30 people, what I usually do is that I write the whole script, right, and then I start practicing on that script, right. So recently I gave a presentation within my own company, and I had this whole audience of senior sales people coming in and listening to my presentation. So I was kind of jittery also. So I just wrote down the complete script for that particular presentation. I practiced it, rehearsed it, whatever. Did not memorize it because it was on Zoom, so on the video call. So I just wrote the script, and then I kind of took out points from that script, and it really helped me with my content. Another thing which I would want to touch upon is the fact that when it comes to communication, especially verbal communication, body language plays 55% of the role. I read it somewhere.
Yeah.
That body language plays 55%
Yeah.
of the role, which includes your hand movements, your gestures, the way you dress up, right? The way you have eye contact with the people.
Yeah.
Right? Secondly, it's the tone of your voice, which
Correct.
contributes like 38%, right? And last is the words you use. Right?
Yeah.
It's only 7%, but still it's very, very important. The words you are choosing. At the same time, I did this short course on LinkedIn, which is by Jeff Ansel. He's he's a law associate in a company. He actually explained the fact that when you're talking to someone, be it a one-on-one communication, right, in an interview or in a presentation or in a setup of 100 people, don't ever use tough English.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
Right. And he also stressed on the fact that if you're speaking, talking or communicating, use short sentences, simple English, and take pauses. So, for example, even if we are communicating, if you don't take pauses, if you don't take short breaks while speaking, people on the other end who are listening to us won't really understand what we're trying to say. And what is the point? What is the reason that most of us fail? Is that there's a term called the racing brain syndrome, which essentially means that either our thoughts are racing, faster than your tongue, the speech, or the tongue is racing faster than the thoughts.
Yeah,
that's happened with me earlier as well, and kind of happens with me sometimes. And the only way to cut back upon that is to practice, prepare, and secondly is to breathe.
Yeah, definitely. I think I completely agree with all of your points. And like drawing back to preparation, I think in the early stages when you're still not very confident about speaking to large crowds or just communicating in general, as you said, writing down your thoughts, preparing what you actually want to speak goes a long way in helping you speak better, because I think it has a twofold effect. So number one is you've already prepared what you want to speak. So you've had the time to go through your sentences, structure what you want to talk about. So you're confident about the language aspect of it, which is the one thing that might put people off. The second thing is when you know that, then you have a slight bit of confidence when you're speaking, because you've already prepared it. You know what words you have to speak. You know what sentence is going to follow after this.
Yeah.
You're able to speak that bit with more confidence. And when you're able to do that with more confidence, that just boosts your morale even further to do better the next time. And I think that process, that constant process, is what will evolve you into becoming a better communicator. So I am not in any way saying that I'm perfect and I don't need communication skills like refinement or I'm at the ideal stage. No, I'm not. There are still so many refinements, so many nuances that I am yet to figure out about myself. And practicing, listening, and getting feedback are definitely three things that will help you be on that constant process of evolution, because learning never stops.
Yeah. And Ragini, do you know that LinkedIn did a research recently and they found that communication is the top most required skill by companies today.
Yeah.
So that kind of reinforces the fact that, even though it's a soft skill as we call it, not a hard skill like coding or designing or whatever, it's a soft skill, but more than anything else, it's a life skill.
I think it's a soft skill that helps you portray what you do to the organization. So when it comes to functional skills, you definitely need to be good at your job. You definitely need to know those technical details to excel at what you do. But if you're not able to communicate to your senior stakeholders, to your peers, to your teams on how you've done what you've done and what's the benefit of that to the overall organization, I think it's very difficult to put across the value of your technical expertise to the team or to the company as a whole. So not just in that sense, I think communicating also brings with it an aspect of leadership ability.
Yeah.
And as you continue to grow in your careers, leadership will become an all-encompassing aspect that's necessary for you to succeed in your career. And I think one of the most things in leadership again becomes how well you're communicating, not just with your senior stakeholders, but with your peers and with people who look up to you. So I think it becomes very important that you start honing your communication skills at the beginning, so that when the time comes for you to lead a team, to lead an organization, to lead a function, whatever it may be, you have the soft skills that you need to back you up.
I think you've raised some great points and you've talked in very clear, simple English using short sentences, and you definitely don't have the racing brain syndrome.
And I think, as you can all see, you definitely don't need to use big words, complicated words, or Shashi Tharoorish words to like make people believe that you know English. You can make do with the simplest of words if you're just able to, again, going back to what we started off this podcast with. If you're able to understand what you want to communicate, how you want to communicate it, and who you're communicating it to. Just these three things, if you're able to keep on top of, I think nothing can stop you from becoming an effective communicator.
I think you already summed it up for me, because I wanted to end this podcast with a final question, as in, for example, if somebody is starting off his or her career right now, or is already there in the corporate world and wants to excel, right? What are the three things you would tell that person in terms of this communication soft skill to do to actually move ahead in life or in the corporate world? Right? What are the three things you would say to that person?
Yeah, I think first thing would be treat communication as an evolving skill that you need to learn, and not something that just on the side along with your technical skill. I think that's number one. So that will include reading, writing, practicing, preparing, whatever it is that it takes to build upon your communication skills and make sure that you grow from strength to strength in that field. The second would be to start speaking up. I think, especially in India, in the culture that we live in, most of us are usually very scared or very fearful of speaking up in meetings in front of our bosses or managers or whatever. And I don't think there's any need for that fear to exist. Only when you speak up, only when you proactively take that effort to speak up in front of a crowd of people, you will start getting that confidence. You will start being heard by people in your organization, and you'll start also being comfortable with speaking up. So it will not become something that makes you get panic attacks over having to speak up in a meeting, but something that just comes naturally to you. It wasn't something that came naturally to me either. I had to work upon it. It almost took me a year to have the confidence to start speaking up in team meetings, in group meetings, and put my point across confidently. But it's a journey that's definitely needed and definitely something you should start practicing for earlier. And third, treat every presentation in your organization like the biggest presentation of your life. So I don't mean to say stress upon it, have panic attacks, have sleepless nights. No. When I say treat it like a big presentation, all I mean is that even if you're going to be presenting only for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, ensure that you're planning and preparing for it in such a way that those 3 minutes are the most punchiest, most effective sentences that you're ever going to speak in front of that audience. Those 3 minutes should be as valuable to them as a 30-minute speech that you might give. So I think these are the three things that can definitely help people go a long way if they're just starting out their career.
Three very important tips and important hacks. To add to that, one exercise which I gave to my students also is that suppose you're giving a 3-minute presentation, as you just mentioned, which is gonna change your life. So first of all, remove the fear of judgment if people are gonna judge you by the way you look and talk and whatever. Remove that first of all. Secondly, if you really wanna give a presentation or give a job interview, a very good exercise is dress up like you're giving a job interview or dress up like you're giving a presentation. First of all, dress up, right? Set up your camera either on your laptop or on Zoom, right? That's the third part. Before that, write a script, right? Either write a script or write the main points, right? Think about those main points, right? What do you want to talk about those main points, right? Prepare a virtual script in your mind or write down whatever you're comfortable with, and then start recording yourself on Zoom like 3 times, 4 times, 5 times until you feel satisfied that you have actually reached a level where you can actually go and present that particular topic to anybody in your corporate, in the company, or in front of your family also, your friends also. Good hack. You can try it out and even send it across to us, and we can definitely give you some feedback on that, right? So on that note, I think I'll wrap up this episode with Ragini Sundarraman, who has been kind enough to come on the show and talk about her journey in the corporate world in terms of a very important life skill, which is communication. Thank you so much, Ragini.
No problem. I think it was all my pleasure. And if this helps even one person hone and improve their communication skills, I think we would have achieved what we wanted to do this podcast.
Definitely. Thank you, Ragini. And I'll see you in another episode of Michael Shots.
Sure.
See you.